Assalamu alaikum. Sadat. It's nice to see you in London, and we really enjoy your company here. So, would you give us some advice in terms of when we speak to non-Muslims, our friends non-Muslims? How should we approach them in starting a conversation, for example, introducing to them Islam generally, basically?
Approaching non-Muslims.
Yes.
Well, everyone has a different, methodology, and mine may not be the best, but I don't really shove the pamphlets down people's throats, because you might manage to give out 100 if you're really being very aggressive, but many of them might get thrown out in the rubbish bin. So we have a pretty laid-back approach here. We just have the table set out, and then we stand here, and I do sometimes call out free information on Islam, and so we let them approach us on their terms. And obviously, it's good to try to speak nicely to people and being respectful of them. We don't want to have like an arrogant attitude towards people. Sometimes, it might be tempting sometimes to think that we're here for hopefully a higher purpose than the purpose many of the people here are for. But I think we should look at everybody as a potential Muslim, and in the midst of this crazy crowd, there might be someone from amongst them, who would be a much better Muslim than we are if they were just given the opportunity or given the message.
So what subjects would you start first when you're discussing with them after the introduction?
Well, honestly, we didn't have many conversations today, but if somebody does slow down to pick something up, I think it's a good idea before they just slip away to at least ask them something. I just ask them a general question. Do you know much about Islam? Do you have any Muslim friends? And I just try to bring up a topic like that. I guess I assume that many of them are Christian, or at least nominal Christians. It's just an assumption I make. I might be wrong. So I just ask them, do you understand that we believe in God and we believe in Jesus as well? Do you have an understanding of that? So sometimes that might trigger some more questions from their side. That opens up the door to a bigger conversation.
Do you generally talk about Islamic issues here when you're explaining to them about Islam, certain subjects of Islam, or do you target actually breaking down their misconceptions and then building upon them? What's your approach? Just talk about Islam as it should be, because most of the cases that we know of, people misunderstand Islam, because Islam is misunderstood largely in the West. So what's your approach? Do you approach them giving them the correct information of what Islam is on the Islamic issues and subjects, or do you start saying, okay, a lot of people have misunderstandings and misconceptions, and you break them down? I mean, what is your approach?
I guess I try to trigger their questions. I try to trigger them to ask questions about women in Islam and terrorism and what is its connection with Islam. But I don't myself explicitly bring up that Islam is not terrorism and Muslims are not terrorists, because I don't think we should always begin by negating what we are not or what Islam is not, because even then we are making an association in their minds between the words Islam and terrorism. So even that's not good to do. Although I guess I'm breaking my own rules right now by even saying this. But what I mean to say is I would rather speak in positive terms about what we believe, about the purpose of life, the purpose of our existence, belief in the Creator, belief in the messengers, talk about these general theological points, like that.
If someone were arguing with you, whether it's their own belief which you're discussing about, or whether it's to do with Islam, what would you say in response? Would you argue in a nice way, or how do you go about settling that issue when someone starts arguing?
Yeah. I mean, first I'll make the disclaimer that I'm just doing this as an amateur, volunteer myself. So I'm learning as I go along as well. And we all make mistakes as well. But obviously a general rule obviously would be to try to avoid argumentation. Maybe if I was sitting privately with him somewhere and it was getting I might debate him. But I think in a public setting like this, if we are loud or if we even appear to look argumentative, people will not give us the benefit of the doubt. They'll often give the other side the benefit of the doubt. It must be this Muslim dressed in Muslim clothing who is being argumentative or offensive to this other person. So it's best to just try to diffuse anything like that, you know, as effectively as you can. Yeah, I mean, you learn as you go along. There's no one solution. There's not a cookie-cutter solution to every situation. You might have a madman just yelling at you, in which case you might want to just ignore him. But if it's a sane individual who is being argumentative, you might just tell him, look, you know, we don't want to argue. Just take the message if you like it. Do with it what you will. We're not here to argue. So,
what would be your advice on certain things that we must not do when giving da'wah? Setting up either tables or one-to-one street da'wah when the approach is right. What things that we mustn't do at all? I'm sure there are lots of things that we do wrong.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing, and that's a reminder to myself as well, is to just try to keep a check on one's own nafs, you know, on one's own ego. That just try to remind yourself that, you know, like I'm not here to try to gain attention. I'm not here because I want to look freakish. We're here because we want to convey the message in an effective manner. So hopefully that will help us to abstain from doing those dumb things which we shouldn't do. Like, for example, you know, going out of your way to offend people. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of things that you don't want to do. Like, for example, I'll give you a concrete example. If we're talking about the hijab, we don't want to say that, well, the reason for the hijab is because we don't want our women to get raped. This just falls wrongly on most people's ears, especially on the ears of most Westerners. It just falls very wrongly on their ears. It gives them the impression that what we're saying is that if you're dressed in the wrong way, if you're dressed in a miniskirt or something like that, then you're asking for it, you're asking to be raped. And that's not the type of you know, impression we want to get across to people. So we just have to be diplomatic. It's not that we have to water things down. We're still teaching them what Islam says about the issue. But we can just tell them that this is the standard, this is the uniform that we believe God has prescribed. We believe that this is the ideal or the best way to dress, the best way to interact with the opposite gender. This is what we believe to be the optimal way of doing things. But we don't necessarily have to, you know, go out of our way to be offensive to them.
Very nice point. What advice would you give to the youth, Muslims, brothers and sisters, who have lots of friends who are non-Muslims, and they meet with them, they chat with them, they play, and they socialize and integrate with them in various parts of their day-to-day lives? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, maybe that's the best situation to do dawah in. You know, you've already befriended a non-Muslim person. You don't even have to necessarily get into theological debates. I mean, just take him along with you. You know, when you guys go to the mosque, just let him tag along, take him along. And don't go too heavy on him or her. Let him or her sit out the prayer, obviously. Let them just watch you pray. Islam is so beautiful, there's a natural attraction in it. So if he's coming to the mosque and seeing you guys pray, he's going to feel left out, or she's going to feel left out. They're going to want to partake in that experience in some way. Take them out for food. So just, you know, show them that Muslims are everyday good people. We're normal people, we're not freaks. And then perhaps gradually then you can sort of break the ice and talk to them about Islam as well. And come out and do this sort of thing, do dawah, street dawah as well. Don't let people dissuade you. And when I say people, I don't even mean non-Muslims. I mean even Muslims. Like today, it was a Muslim female that came up to me. And they'll ask you, why are you doing this? Why are you dressed like this? Why are you giving this out? Don't you know you should be modern? Don't you know you should be like everybody else? Expect this even from fellow Muslims. And same advice, don't be overly harsh on them as well. You know what I mean? Just show them that you're a normal, good person. They shouldn't be judging you based on the way that you're dressed.
There are a lot of young people who are very interested. When I say young people, Muslim brothers and sisters, very enthusiastic to give da'wah, but they find it difficult in the sense that, you know, they're not that confident to approach people. Do you think this is because they think they don't know enough about Islam themselves, or there's something that's not quite right? I mean, why do they feel that there is an obstacle, there is something that they cannot approach, and they cannot break that barrier, but they're really motivated and encouraged to give da'wah?
Yeah, I think you just have to do it. You have to dive in. It's like a swimming pool and the water is cold and you're very hesitant to get in. Sometimes you just have to jump in. So we have to overcome that shyness. Shyness and modesty, humility, these are good things. But then there's a time not to be shy as well. Even shyness can be hijacked by shaitan and used for a bad purpose. Like, I give people the example. Suppose there's somebody lying injured here on the street asking for help, and I don't stop because I'm shy, because I don't want to be seen with that person. I don't want the people around here to think that maybe this is a drunk or this is a druggie and I'm part of the problem and I'm his friend. But no, that's not a time for shyness, right? When it comes to doing the right thing, I should inquire of that person. Is he hurt? What's the problem? Can I call the ambulance to help you? So same thing with dawah too. Like, don't be shy about being seen. Who cares? That's all I would say. There's people out here on Oxford Street with green hair. There's guys with rings through their noses. There's guys who are cross-dressed as women. There's women who are cross-dressed as men. They're not shy. They're not scared of being seen. So why should we be scared of being seen? We're not doing anything wrong, right? We're basically calling people back to the worship of our Lord, back to the worship of the Creator. That's not something to be ashamed of. So don't worry about being seen. Just do it. And you might end up enjoying, and you'll get more confident as you go along. I mean, I'm learning as I go along. I might get a question I might not have an answer to. That would be another thing not to do, is not make up an answer on the spot. If you don't know, sometimes people will respect you more if you say, I have to look into this, I'm not entirely sure. And that can be an opportunity for you to learn and grow as well.
If they feel they need a lot to learn about Islam, particularly because they didn't have that exposure, they haven't been to a proper Islamic education themselves, because they've just been to the normal education that they get in schools and colleges or universities here. So where should they start? Learning about Islam to make them better Muslims, so that they can practice Islam as they should, as well as learning the material which they can utilize effectively in giving da'wah. Where should they start?
Well, I confess that I don't have a formal, traditional, Islamic education either. But yes, obviously that would be the best way to start. I mean, every mosque and Islamic organization nowadays, they often have, if not dawah training courses, I mean, even basic fiqh and learning the Quran. All of these things will come in handy, obviously, at some point when you're interacting with non-Muslims and they ask you questions about Islam. But at the same time, you don't have to know everything in the world. You get the hang of it. You realize that most people have the same basic 7, 8, 9, 10 questions, and those questions will keep on coming back to you again. So even if you know your fiqh inside out, but you don't have an effective way of explaining something like the hijab, or an effective way of explaining why, for instance, we don't believe in the whole of the Bible, let's say. Many Christians will ask us. I think practice is good, just training on the ground is good as well. So ideally, the formal education, if it went hand in hand with practical training on the street, I think that might be the best way to approach it.
Is there any particular websites, books, any internet-based resources, or any educational material, whether they come in the MP3s or DVDs, anything that you think might be useful, anything that you can recommend?
Yeah, exactly. Nowadays with the internet, it's a big help. We shouldn't take our knowledge exclusively from the internet, obviously, when it comes to our knowledge of Islam. But as a supplemental learning tool, it's very effective. There is the Muslim Debate Initiative website, MDI, Muslim Debate Initiative. You can Google that. Personally, I'm just giving you my personal opinion. I like watching the debates of Shabir Ali. He's debated many Christians as well as atheists, agnostics. That would be a good place to start. And there's Islamic Awareness. If you type into Google Islamic Awareness, that's a bit more of a detailed site, but that's an apologetic site that will help equip you with arguments in defense of, let's say, the Quran, or how to reconcile apparent contradictions in the Quran, or where it appears that there's something contradictory in the Quran. It addresses issues of manuscripts of the Quran, how the Quran was transmitted, how it was preserved. So that maybe on a more advanced level, that website is also a very good quality website to look at.
How do you set up a dawah table?
I've never done it. I've only joined it, but I know that the brothers, before me, may Allah reward them, I guess they must have worked out an arrangement with the Whammy Mosque, for instance, over here. I don't know if it was Whammy's idea or whether it was proposed to Whammy, but basically we have a table. You can go to IKEA, you can go to any sort of home furnishing store and buy one of these tables that fold up and you can carry it like a suitcase. So something that is practical, a table that folds up very nicely. And we just put a prayer mat on top of the table and we put the Whammy pamphlets. Whammy is the World Assembly of Muslim Youth. So we have their pamphlets that we just set up and we give them out. Yeah.
So I assume it's quite legal to have a table in public places?
That's an excellent question, and I'm sorry to say that I don't have the answer either. Obviously, the answer will vary from locality to locality. Here at Oxford Circus, it's been very irregular. Even the police that patrol the area have given us very irregular signals. At times they've told us we can't have a table, but we can give out pamphlets. At other times they've just turned a blind eye to the table. It's not been a problem. I think as a general rule, if you try not to obstruct the pedestrians too much, I don't personally think megaphones is a good idea. It's going to attract even the wrong type of attention, and you'll find police authorities coming and giving you a harder time if you do that. Whereas if you're sort of to the side, you're not obstructing people and you're giving out pamphlets, I think they're a bit more sympathetic, or they're more likely to turn a blind eye. And of course, I would qualify this by saying that you should cooperate with the authorities at all times. And if they tell you that you need to apply for some sort of license, then do it. I mean, do things the proper way, and just look into the information, for yourself. But never, you don't want to be argumentative with the authorities. You're going to make things difficult not only for yourself, but for other Muslims as well. So you want to be cooperative with the authorities.
So what should be there on a table then? What sort of material? Books, CDs, DVDs, leaflets? What should be there, do you think, at least the bare essentials? And what shouldn't be there?
Yeah, okay, in terms of what shouldn't be there, to start with that, it's my personal opinion, and I do appreciate the other side. I can see the argument on the other side as well, but I don't have like pamphlets here saying Islam is not terrorism, because I don't even want the words terrorism and Islam put in people's minds and created as a mind association, no other religion has to do that. I don't think we should, have to do that. But we do in our bag have pamphlets on Islam and terrorism and a DVD. So if someone were to ask us, like, what is this business about jihad, or why so much terrorism in the Muslim world, then we do have some material geared towards that question that we can give them as well. What else not to include? I've seen some dawah tables in the past in East London, and when I went up to them, there was more on George Bush, there were more pamphlets about Tony Blair than there was about Allah and the Prophet. So it was overly political. I mean, even if you want to include some political materials, even that I can understand. You want to put something on Palestine or something, I can understand. But it so overpowered the table that it seemed that the table was more about Tony Blair, it was more about George Bush than it was about God, and His Prophet. So again, we try to stick to the theological side of it, the religious side of it. Basically, pamphlets on women in Islam, pamphlets on the hijab, pamphlets on the Quran. What is the Quran? What reasons do we have to believe in the Quran? If there's pamphlets on the life of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, giving a really summarized, description of his life, these are good places to start. And of course, you should look at these pamphlets as a teaser, as a bait. You don't want to end with that, but when somebody slows down to pick up one of those pamphlets, we want to use it as an excuse to try to have a good quality conversation with that person.
So do I assume you must know what's in the pamphlets if you have some pamphlets on the table? So if you're distributing leaflets, you should have read them yourself first to know what they're...
Yes, absolutely, yeah, because in Toronto, some brothers ran into this very problem, exactly. They had some pamphlets here and there, and they weren't acquainted with the contents of the pamphlet. And then there were, things said in the media that this type of information is being given out, this sort of radical information is being given out in downtown Toronto. So you should be well acquainted with what is in the pamphlets, of course. You don't want something there justifying suicide bombing and you didn't even know about it, and you're giving that out to people, and then we look two-faced because the pamphlet might be saying one thing, we might be saying another thing. So try to keep the message consistent at least.
And in your experience, how many people should at least be in a table, in a dawah table? Do you think one person is actually a safe way of doing dawah if you have a dawah table? Or at least there should be a minimum number?
Yeah, 2 or 3 is good. Yeah, 2 or 3 is good. If it's just one, then as you mentioned, there could be some problems of safety. Safety meaning not just somebody like physically assaulting you. That's not likely to happen. It's never happened to us. But somebody could just make up a fake story about what was said or not said. So it helps if there's another witness, somebody there backing you up. You know what I mean? But if it's more than 3, and especially if it's all brothers, then I think people get intimidated, you know, to approach the table. Even me as a guy, if I saw there's a table there, let's say a Christian table, and it's just 5-6 guys just hanging out there at the table, even I might be hesitant to go to that table. Yeah. But if there's 2, I think that's really a perfect number, 2 or 3.
And especially for practical reasons, if the salah time comes, then you can rotate.
Yeah, I mean, there's all practical considerations. Right now we're 2 or 3, so it's no problem. If I get thirsty, I can walk to Marks and Spencer. They can look after the table. So we support one another in that way.
Have you spoken to a lot of people who don't believe in any religion at all?
Yeah, actually, sometimes we forget that that is the dominant religion, in a sense, agnosticism. Not so much atheism, but maybe agnosticism is in a sense the dominant religion. It's people who believe in, people who are open to the possibility of a God existing, but they don't adhere to any one religious tradition. And, you know, that's a very convenient stance for people to take as well.
Why do you think a lot of people, more and more people, like that we see in the West today, are becoming atheists? Is there a trend? Is there any specific reason, do you think? Just so that our young brothers, Muslims, sisters and brothers may be aware of this. Because if you look at it now, in the past few years, people are actually turning away from their own religions. I'm talking in the context of in England here. I'm not sure how this is in Canada. They were Christian in their background, Jewish in their background, but they're not religious at all. In fact, they've turned into atheism or become agnostic. What could be the factors, do you think?
Yeah, there's so many factors. One is that we are farther away from the time of the prophets, you know, so it's like a pebble that falls in a pond and the ripples, the ripples come out from the epicenter, but then the ripples start fading as they get farther and farther away. So maybe it's just a sign of the times. Maybe we are closer to the end. We're farther away from the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him. So that prophetic light seems maybe dimmer. You have to dig deeper to discover it, and to find it, and to find the true guidance. That could be a part of it. It could just be a cultural fad and trend. Many young people pride themselves on the fact that they're not religious and they became agnostics because they see it as a very brave intellectual stance that, you know, I went against tradition, I went against religion, even though they don't realize they're falling into the same trap because they're following the dominant religion. The religion of most of these people on the street is not really Christianity, it's just agnosticism, the belief that God exists. But if he does exist, he's not particularly concerned with how we live our lives or day-to-day regulations or things like that. So they too are just following the dominant trend of their society. The wind is blowing this way, so people are walking this way type of thing. I think Christianity probably gets a lot of the blame as well for more and more people apostating and becoming agnostics. I think Christianity traditionally has not fared very well in trying to rationalize their faith and in trying to, let's say, address modern questions of science and things like this. So this is something we can try to bring to the attention of people, that there is at the bare minimum you can explain to them that there is less of a tension between the Quran, for instance, and the findings of modern science than there are between the Bible and the findings of modern science. And then another factor in people becoming leaving religions might be us, you know, our bad example. Our bad example. So when people with long beards and hijabs, if we are the ones who are defrauding the system, cheating the system, involved in every type of theft and gimmicks and tricks, then this is not going to have a good impression on the people around us. Whereas if they see and they perceive us to be good, honest, decent folk who take care of our women, our families are intact, our marriages are intact, we're people of integrity, we deal in honesty with our colleagues, I mean, that alone would be a much bigger statement than anything that we can give out here at a dawah table.
So basically, in our day-to-day practical lives, we should be representing as Muslims, and people should see us, that we reflect the messages that the prophets have left behind, so that, you know, this should be some encouragement for them to think, oh, you know, there is something good in the way of life you're living.
Yeah.
Just because we're not doing that, it's so true. You know, if you look at how we live our lives here, they can't even differentiate whether you're a Muslim or not. You just have you've even changed your name from Muhammad to Mo.
Yes.
You know, so how do they even know? Because you socialize with them, go to their pubs and their discos and their parties. So it is quite difficult, actually, I think, and this is, for this reason, we are to blame. Do you find totally different questions on this? When you are talking to different groups of people, do you modify your approach, the way you speak, the substance that you use in your conversation with them, depending on what's their religious, theological background or ideological background? Because clearly someone who's left a religion and become an atheist or agnostic, you know, they've done some intellectual reasonings, you know, on their faith, and there are others who are emotionally attached. Do you modify your approach depending on who you're speaking to, or do you have a one blanket approach to speak to everyone?
Yeah, no, definitely you don't want to take the cookie cutter approach, because God has made people with different temperaments, so you want to try as best as you can to speak to their temperament. That doesn't mean we're changing the message, but changing the delivery of the message. So not everyone's going to be impressed necessarily with science in the Quran or mathematical codes in the Quran. Maybe if someone is an accountant and his mind is already bent in that way, he or she might be impressed by such details. But people operate very differently. People are very, very different. So, for instance, if I spoke to somebody who is an environmentalist or a dog lover, you know, I'm not going to start by telling her, well, dog saliva is haram and you can't keep dog. There are some people that will do this. Wouldn't it be better to share hadiths about how the Prophet loved animals, how he treated animals, how he was compassionate to animals? And with that environmentalist, you might not need to have to speak about anything else that time. You could perhaps just speak about, you know, environmentalism, how Islam teaches us to conserve resources, to not waste water, to not eat more than our fill. That might be the window into that person's heart. And again, if I were speaking to, let's say, a very devout Christian or a Jew, let's say, I mean, it's never happened actually, but let's say they were an Orthodox Jew here, I would probably want to mention to him that the Prophet Moses, peace be upon him, is the most mentioned prophet by name in the Quran. But I might not necessarily give that detail to a Christian because it's not relevant. I'm not hiding anything. It's not relevant. But if I'm speaking to a Catholic, now I want to tell her that chapter 19 of the Quran is named after Mary, the mother of Jesus, because a Catholic is going to find that very fascinating. And if it's a Protestant Christian, then again, I tell them the status of Jesus in Islam. So yes, you can cater your message slightly differently depending on who you're speaking with.
You know, a lot of us involved in dawah, well, we have begun to give dawah, for example, very enthusiastic. Should we feel frustrated if we don't find a shahada? Or is this not our goal? People go there and they think, I've spoken to them, you know, given them all the arguments. So I want to ask you another question on this as well, because there are people out there, Muslim brothers or sisters, who think we should be purely using our reason and our intellect and give all that intellectual arguments. And there are others on the other hand, they just talk about the emotional aspect, you know, how emotionally, you know, but not utilizing any intellectual reasoning, so rational argumentation. Should there be a balance? That's the one question. And the question that I started with is, should we feel frustrated because people are not becoming Muslims? And should that be our goal? Like, oh, this week we haven't got any Muslims, next week we should try to get one Shahada. Or something, this is some, leave it in the hands of Allah. What is the right approach?
No, definitely, yeah, it's in the hands of Allah, you know what I mean? Allah guides like whoever He wills. So, yeah, oftentimes I get asked that, have you been successful, or have you had much success today? And it depends on how you define success. If the benchmark that you set is the number of shahadas that you got, then I'll say to you that no, I'm not very successful either. But I remember once a friend told me that we should be delivery oriented and not necessarily results oriented, but delivery oriented. So that's how I view it. I view every second being here as a success, That itself is tawfiq from Allah, that He granted us the ability and the desire to want to be here. We just by standing here, we might be a visual reminder of Islam, even to fellow Muslims, you know what I mean? I just see it, I use the analogy of it's like planting seeds, and then whether the seed grows or not, don't worry about it, but at least plant the seed, and you never know what will grow. And the other thing is, conversion is sometimes a multiple process. So you might have helped somebody get to step 2, and then another Muslim that he meets might help that person to get to step 3. And then it might be another Muslim that he meets who seals the deal and says, come on, say the Shahada now, what are you waiting for, right? So even if we've nudged the person a bit closer to Islam, or helped remove 1 or 2 misconceptions about Islam, that's the benchmark I set. I feel that, alhamdulillah, that we've done something positive, and something is better than nothing. And sometimes even Muslims will try to discourage you. Be very wary about this, Muslims will say, well, you've been giving out pamphlets all day, how many people converted to Islam? But if we wanted to apply that skeptical mindset to them, we could say the same thing. We could say, well, you've been a good worker in the office all your life, you give samosas out every Eid. How many people converted to Islam because you gave samosas to them during Eid? So no, we shouldn't look at it skeptically. That is a good act that they're doing, and inshallah, if we're doing this with the right intention, this too is a good act, and that's all that should matter, We don't have to be concerned about tallying up the number of converts at the end of the day.
As to whether we should have both intellectual reasonings alone or emotional approach, where should we draw the line?
Yes, by default, yes, because I would like to think that most people have an emotional side to them and they have an intellectual side to them. So we should have a balance. We shouldn't approach everything just logically and intellectually. We should provide some intellectual good reasons and evidences for Islam, but then we can also appeal to them emotionally as well. So for example, telling a Catholic that chapter 19 of the Quran is named after Mary, that doesn't prove anything intellectually. But I'm saying that for a reason, because I want to open up their heart. I want them to warm up to Islam a little bit and see that something that they love, something that they cherish very much in their tradition, can be found in the Islamic tradition as well. So by default, yes, I would use a bit of intellectual reasoning as well with the emotional side as well. But once in a while, you have somebody who might be an exception to the rule. You might have a person, oftentimes it might be a woman who is just mostly emotional. Yeah. She might just be mostly emotional. And the only reason she might be a born-again Christian is just for emotional reasons. It might be that in the person of Jesus, she sees this friendly father figure that she never had in her life. She sees that man who doesn't want her physically. He's just there for her. And she never had that in life from her husband or from her partner or her spouse or what have you. So to a person like that, you might have to rely a little bit more on the emotional side. And just talk about the character of the Prophet, peace be upon him, how he treated women, what he said about women. And so that might be the thing that will attract her. And then sometimes you might have somebody who is more intellectually, minded. And you have to prove things to him intellectually. But by default, I assume that every human being has an intellectual component and an emotional component, and you should try to address both of those things when speaking to somebody.
is there any role of giving supplementary information at the end of a conversation? Like some leaflets. Suppose you had just a conversation, a discussion with them. Do you think it's better to hand out some leaflets, or at least, where they can get that information? A copy of the Quran that you may have with you, or where to actually get it in the local masjid. Do you think giving supplementary information will stick what you have discussed already?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, try to find out people's names, call them by their first names, speak to them so they know that you're speaking to them in a personal way. Give them your name. Don't forget these obvious things. I forget it actually. Today I didn't do that, but give them your name. And yeah, if you have a good conversation with somebody, give out your email, give them a contact number, something by which they can contact you and get more information. Have a pen ready. Again, we didn't have that, but have a pen and paper ready. Give them some websites. Give them some contact details for where they can get more information from. Yeah.
Any nice tips they can give to people who are interested as well in terms of thinking about now becoming a da'iyah?
Yeah, just come out and do it. MashaAllah, like in London, there's so many opportunities. You don't even have to be the pioneer. You can join something that is already established. So at Kilburn Market, for example, every Saturday at Kilburn Market, there's several brothers who go out there and do dawah. Actually much more effective than ourselves. They have like shahadas every week, mashallah. So why not join them? Why not tag along and just see how do they do it? What works? What doesn't work? There's Kilburn Market here. In Toronto, where I'm from, there's Dundas Square in front of the Eden Centre. There's here in London again, there's Speaker's Corner, Hyde Park. Go there on a Sunday and just watch people, and you will learn as yourself what is effective, what works, what doesn't work.
So if you were to summarize, for someone who wants to be a da'i, who wants to invite people to Islam, what characteristics or character rather, traits or attributes they should be harboring, developing, nurturing, nourishing, so that it's good for them in this life and the hereafter, as well as it radiates out to the other people. So what do you think, in a nutshell, you would summarize a Muslim da'i? The moment you see a person, you know this person, yes, has the right approach, is doing the da'wah, is himself or herself practicing. What are those essential characteristics of character traits?
Well, in general, we want to work on all of those characteristics, that a believer should have. So, I mean, just in general, I guess, having fear of Allah, and there should be a bare minimum. Obviously, you should be practicing Islam on the bare minimum level. Otherwise, why should we preach to other people if we're not following some fundamentals ourselves? So, obviously keep your prayers in order, observe the salat and things like this. And just pray to Allah for tawfiq, and just always remind yourself that you're not better than the other people. They haven't been exposed to the message the way you have. If I wasn't born and raised in a Muslim family, then I might not have cared to have looked into Islam. So just remind yourself that in the midst of these people, there could be somebody that could become a saint and somebody who is far better than ourselves. And we want to find that one in a million. Even if it only is one in a million, we want to find that one in a million and convey the message of Islam to them.
And we should always be sincere in our intention. Not to ever think of that we're doing this just to show off that yes, I can do it, or I've got this knowledge or skill, but rather we should be doing this more for the sake of Allah, to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sincerity for the sake of Allah. Yeah, exactly. It's not to stand out, and it's not to look different. It's not to pick a fight or pick an argument or to be seen, but it's for the pleasure of Allah, and obviously for our akhirah, because we hope that this will count as a good deed, and hopefully it'll erase or cover some of our bad deeds or our misdeeds, on the Day of Judgment.
Jazakallahu khairan. I appreciate your time and your good advice to our brothers and sisters who who are in dawah or want to go into dawah. That's their intentions. And you've given us a lot of practical tips. May Allah reward you. Jazakallahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, brother. Islam.